Blackman is a fourth, fifth generation Japanese American, but he's born and raised in Seattle. And he has served for 2 years as the Civic Engagement Program Manager at Asian Counseling and Referral Service. I think all three of them have civic engagement, if not in their title, certainly in their background, which is why I get to work with them. So he executes a variety of civic engagement activities for Asian and Pacific Islander immigrant refugees living in King County, and supports the Asian Pacific Islander Coalition of Washington. Next we have Guillermo Rogel, I knew I would miss him, who is with the Washington Student Association as organizing director, and where he focuses on student advocacy, young person engagement, another of our big priorities. And he's tasked with engaging students to work on legislative priorities, which has allowed him to travel the state and visit students at all the members' campuses. He became executive director almost 3 years ago. He's the proud son of immigrant parents from Mexico and El Salvador. And his focus is making our system of higher education accessible and affordable for all people. And in free time, he likes making to-do lists. We respect that. Bree Wider is right now a policy analyst with the Attorney General's office, but that's not why we invited her. We invited her because I had the pleasure of getting to know her when she worked at Win-Win as a, I'm just going to say a data geek, I can't remember her title, but she helped support access to data for Win-Win members. She really, which you will clearly hear, is passion when she's working for racial justice and equity within structural institutions. She grew up volunteering every election day with her parents, which gave her a very grounded belief in social justice and progressive politics. She worked for Organizing America and Planned Parenthood. She currently, as I said, is a policy analyst for Bob Ferguson and serves on a number of boards. Oscar Zambrano, far right here, was born, I didn't know this until today, actually, was born in Mexico and brought to the USA at the age of 2, and became a youth advocate as early as the 6th grade, and despite being absolutely, what's this word? Despite being absolutely brilliant, he could not go to college because, he says it more nicely, but I'll say because of our stupid immigration policy. We treat people who don't have to be born in this country. So rather than just being angry, he moved that into action. He created a coalition for the California Dream Act and was very involved in that successful effort, so that now people who were not born here can go to college. And he then became a national managing organizer for the FL-CIO, and now focuses on youth and civic engagement. So again, they are all just terrific allies, and I'm so pleased to work with them. And now I will welcome Heather Kelly, who you all know and love.
I hope you're clapping for all the rock stars to my right. I'm just here to get them talking about themselves, and to hopefully get you all inspired too. So the first thing I want to kick off with is just sort of, I know Kathy sort of discussed in broad strokes your work, but can you all describe in a little more detail what kind of advocacy work you do, like even what a general week for you looks like, or what your favorite advocacy projects are? That would be great.
Sure, I can start. Before I begin, I just want to shout out April Donato, who I saw here. She was my 12th grade English teacher. My favorite teacher that I ever had throughout high school. She has influenced me such a big impact on my life. Teachers are amazing, so I just wanted to say that before we start. But my name is... Okay, I can say that. Hi, my name is Bree Weeder. So I work at the Attorney mother-in-law's office, so I work in the policy unit, and I actually run a statewide task force that's working on reducing hate crimes throughout the state of Washington. So that's something that I'm really passionate about right now. Hate crimes are on the rise. They're at historic levels that we haven't seen in over 16 years in the United States. We just had our second task force meeting yesterday. So kind of a week in the life of Bree. It's a lot of researching. I read a lot of really sad stories about what is happening around the country, what is happening in our state. I was talking to Oscar a little bit about what's happening currently out in Eastern Washington, particularly in Yakima, with the Latino population there. And they are experiencing just huge barriers to fully engage in our civic society. So a lot of it is me not only talking to the governor's office, talking to lawyers throughout my office, talking to folks like the U.S. Attorney's Office for the Western District, but I also spend a lot of time trying to go out in community as well, reaching out to impacted communities. And I think it's really important for somebody like me to be in this role. Oftentimes, I'm the only non-white man on a panel of law enforcement. They show up and the representative from the AG's office is me, and I'm like, hello, we're going to talk about racism today. But I think it's really important that people see that there are folks that have a racial justice, racial analysis lens doing this kind of work, because we understand what it's like to be marginalized, and we understand not only what it's like to be the only person in a room, but to go out and live our lives and feel and know that we are other. And so I really spend so much of my time trying to break that down, make people feel comfortable in these institutions that weren't necessarily built for us, but I'm trying to change that.
Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Guillermo Rogel. I'm with the Washington Student Association. Thank you, Kathy, for extending the invitation. I think this is already my favorite panel because I'm friends with all of these folks. I just had Bree on a panel for the Washington Student Association like a month ago, so it's nice to be on a panel now with her. So with the Washington Student Association, we are a 501c4 that advocates for making college more affordable and accessible for the public four-year universities. So it's entirely student-run. So we have student representatives from all the UW campuses, all the Wazoo campuses, and all the regional campuses that are a part of our association. So my job is really to act as their lobbyist when they're not in session, but then when they're in session, we have a team of 12 students who move down full-time to Olympia. They get full-time academic credit, and they get paid to be a lobbyist for their respective schools. So things that are, that's really my favorite part of our advocacy is kind of, I've already been lobbying professionally for about 4 or 5 years, but their students, they go in like 1 week and they're already meeting with the Senate Majority Leader or the Speaker of the House, and then they're like, what do we do? I was like, exactly what we practice. So this coming year, we're advocating for more financial aid for undocumented students, more sexual assault prevention and education resources, and also just kind of like stabilizing our overall financial aid program in Washington State. Last year, we were able to secure $1 billion in new funding for financial aid. So now, it used to be families making under $50,000 would get financial aid from the state. Now it's $90,000 and below. Yeah, so we are really excited about that. Well, did I answer the question?
Yeah. A plus.
Thank you.
Okay, is this one, can folks hear me?
Yeah.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Joseph Shoji Lockman. I use he and his pronouns, and again, I am the Civic Engagement Program Manager for the last couple of years at Asian Counseling and Referral Service in Seattle, and we support the Asian Pacific Islander Coalition of Washington. For folks who may be not familiar with Asian Counseling and Referral Service, so we're an organization that's been around for 46 years, and we serve the kind of Greater Seattle, King County area, Asian American, Pacific Islander, immigrant refugee communities, serve over 30,000 clients a year in over 40 languages and dialects. We have a diverse array of staff who help folks with everything from citizenship and employment to mental health counseling, recovery services. We do youth programs as well as outreach to providing care to the elderly. So it's a whole variety of programs that we do. But what my job is to make sure that we integrate civic engagement into all of these departments and make sure that everybody who's coming through our doors, regardless of their immigration or citizenship status, has chances to engage with the democratic process locally, statewide, at all different levels. One thing I want to mention, of course, is a huge thank you to League of Women Voters for including us here. Thank you so much, Kathy, for including us. And also, it's really great, though, to all be a part of the Voting Justice Coalition together. One thing that I did note that was in the question was what led you to becoming engaged in this kind of work? And one thing I did want to mention, though, actually, is one reason that I do this work, and that's partly it's my background as a fourth, fifth generation Japanese American. So I don't know if some folks, I think some folks are pretty familiar with it, but it's the story of Japanese American incarceration. And that's one thing that really has, I think, colored the history from my family. My family actually, on my mother's side, the Japanese American side, has lived in Seattle since 1907. And continuously, only with the exception of the few years that they were incarcerated in the desert in Minidoka in Idaho. And when talking about all kinds of racial justice, including voting justice, it was hard for them to stay engaged with their community, with their democracy when they were locked up, and to even have faith that it was actually for them. And that's something that I think a lesson that's been passed down in my family for generations as a result. And after I completed my undergraduate studies, I was coming back, and I realized that I needed to find a way to get involved after completing my undergraduate studies on the East Coast. I ended up just making a cold call to the Council on American Islamic Relations and asking, is there anything I can do? And they were kind of surprised, and then I mentioned my Japanese American background, and just asked if I could come in and just do an interview with them. And I actually ended up being an intern with them for 6 months. I started out working on a lot of donor relations related things, but we quickly realized, because of my Japanese American background, that I really wanted to find ways to help bring communities together, to talk about ways that we could work together, and actually use a historical lens to help empower communities today that are dealing with oppression. And Council on American Islamic Relations began working on more civic engagement efforts to actually get Muslim youth meeting with their legislators and engaged. And I found that so powerful that I wanted to continue that. And actually, I was speaking at a conference, and it was talking about opportunities. I was doing a workshop talking about opportunities for Asian American Pacific Islanders to use our unique historical background to actually be stronger allies in interracial solidarity work. And I actually met the woman who was doing my job at the time at Win-Win. I think you know Monica. The funny thing now, actually working at Asian Counseling Referral Service, we actually use a lot of important data through Win-Win, one of our partners, and I actually use lists that were created by Breen, actually. So it's important how we all support each other in this work, and ever since then, I found more and more ways that I'm able to contribute to making our democracy stronger for everyone, but focusing really on, because of my background in Asian American Pacific Islander communities, and making sure that they have every opportunity to be engaged in our democracy. Thank you.
Hello everybody, my name is Oscar Zambrano Mendez, and I am the Director of Civic Engagement Advocacy for Latino Community Fund, and the Political Director for Progreso C4. Is that better? Thank you. Sorry, what was the question? I have all the questions.
Basically, can you just elaborate on why you're amazing? Tell us what you do and why you feel like, why you came to this work.
Why do we not do that? Okay. It's funny because when I go to these panels, I always say that I didn't choose politics. Politics chose me to be into this field, and it was out of necessity. in necessity, and I think that's where I first understand privilege, in the sense that I didn't have the traditional route of being a youth, that I can just, everybody told me, go to college, my middle school teachers, my high school teachers, but then there was always a law, or there was always something as a barrier. And in 1994, Prop 187 from Governor Peters of California basically was the same law that Trump wants to enact, which is basically get rid of all social services, education, healthcare, emergencies to immigrant families. I remember being in middle school and my teacher, Ms. McKinney, bless her heart, she told us, if your parents can vote, please tell them to vote against Prop 187. And I said, well, what is Prop 187? Because I'm a sixth grader. And she said, well, basically, if your parents or you are undocumented, especially you kids, if you're undocumented, you can't come back after winter break. And for being Latinos, my mom always told me, she's like, either you go to school or you go to work. And I said, well, I guess I have to start working January 1st. Because the laws of California get enacted January 1st. So then she told me, but if you, and so I told her, well, my parents were not, documented, or we don't have the legal status. What can I do? She said, well, you Latinos have a great power, something called cheese man. Cheese man means gossip. And the thing is that about that is like you're excellent communication. So how about you start knocking doors and making calls to people that actually have the power to vote? And so that election, being sixth grade, I learned the power of voting, which was that if I shared my story with enough people, and it was all a numbers game at that point, that if I talk to enough people and share my story with enough people, I'll get probably like 1 no for 2 yeses. And I said, I just have to like double my numbers. And in sixth grade, I started canvassing phone banking for Congressman Brown back then in California. And he was against Prop 187, and bless his heart, he also helped me get into like other civics activities. And Prop 187 passed, but then that's when I learned the second body of government, which is the judicial branch. And I learned that if the laws are unconstitutional and unfair, you can actually fight them in court. And so I continued my advocacy through the Supreme Court by keeping people involved. We did walkouts in California the day after the law passed. And I think, I don't want to say it was me, but I'm saying, just saying that a group of my peers, we were peer leaders, we were self-identified leaders in our community, that we walked out and we collected over 300 students from our school district and then went to City Hall. And the day after, we saw the same movement at UCs, Cal States, and other schools around California. That was the biggest lesson for me, and I think answering the question is that it was out of necessity. It wasn't because this was a hobby or this was something that I had free time to do. It was because if I didn't do this, I would not go back to school the January after winter break. Thank God for the laws, and I feel strongly that our judicial system is still working to some degree, because that law was struck unconstitutional by the California Supreme Court, and people still lost re-election, so thank God. So I think, out of that, now my work as a testament of being a youth and mobilized and empowered at that early age, I feel very strongly about youth advocacy and youth organizing. And I'm glad all my friends here I love working with everybody here. Thanks to the league and Kathy and everybody else for inviting us, because I really feel like the next movement is coming and it's going to be led by youth. Great testament, we have our lead policy organizer here from LCF as well, and he's 21?
Yeah, just
turned 21. So, and I think that goes to say that my work with the Latino Community Fund and Progreso is to really build more sustainable and equitable organizations across the state. We are a 501c3, and we do fiscal sponsorship for Latino focus, Latino serving organizations across the state. We work statewide with other partners, and we have a pretty good lens of what's going on in rural communities as well, especially when actually Yakima, Tri-Cities, and Spokane Valley. And all I can say is that, thank you for having us here, and let's have a good conversation.
So we have about get out in the community and promote, give a voice to the causes that we're supporting. And to be completely candid, sometimes I'm really nervous doing that work because it's public speaking and it's engaging with electeds and it's just sort of comes with an aspect of, sort of public-facing engagement. And I know, the audience here is a mixed group of folks, some of whom are new to activism and some of whom are seasoned activists, but for those who are wanting to engage more and feeling like their comfort zone is kind of keeping them from doing that, what advice would you have? Yeah, you seem like the natural person to begin.
I really I have two theories. I like baby steps, and I also like trial by fire. And I think one of them is kind of getting to know people's comfort zone, and just there's always room for different kinds of activism. I always tell people, there's always room for writing thank you letters. You could get behind the mic if you want to get behind the mic. You can do different kinds of workshops if that's your thing. So I would say, first identify what it is that you're comfortable with, and then kind of take the steps that there's different development steps for your leadership. So, you can start recruiting, you can start talking to people about the issues, even just talking to your local community members. Because sometimes I think the hardest thing isn't talking to legislators or decision makers. It's your family or your problematic friend. And, learn to engage in those conversations, because I think that's kind of when you break your own kind of comfort zone, is starting to engage in those topics. And then the other one is trial by fire, which is just bring people into those meetings and just being look, this is what, I don't like the term how the sausage is made, but that is the only thing that comes to mind is some students I know have never been into lobby meetings, and sometimes they show up to meetings and I'm I didn't know you were coming. And they're like, oh, what are we doing? I was like, oh, we're meeting with a specific legislator. And then I was like, you can come in. I was like, and sit through it. Even just sitting through a meeting is good enough, I think, for a kind of exposure.
So show up.
Yeah, even just showing up, yeah.
I would say, first of all, I think that this is an issue that women in particular, we think about, in all honesty, more than men ever do. We really do. I come into situations knowing that my male counterparts are never thinking about these things. They go in with all the confidence that they don't deserve. No offense to the men on the panel with me. You all are great, you're all friends. But as somebody that works in structural institutions, I've worked in the Senate, I've worked in the House, I now work for the AGO. So much of it is projecting the confidence that you think others should see you as. All of us are here in this room because we are passionate. If you are going out and talking to your community, you are passionate, you are smart, and take all of that and go out and just speak your truth. Whenever I get nervous, whenever I think that I'm not ready for something, I think back to the fact that Martin Luther King did the March on Washington when he was 25 years old. Wow. A 25-year-old did that. John Lewis was arrested in Selma when he was 21 years old. We have the power. We are the power. The power that you think that everyone else has in those positions, we give them that. And we can take it back at any time. Yeah.
It's the power of your own story. I think that I still feel nervous all the time. Especially when I talk to legislators and so on. But I think that something that I think Bree brought up is that even as a person of color, we have to prove that we deserve to be there. Mm-hmm. And that is tough enough because it's already uncomfortable being in the room where you come in as a minority, but not just a minority, but you have to prove that you're intelligent enough, you're aware enough, and you have the language enough to be able to have these conversations. So it's still intimidating no matter what, but I think it's also finding a mentor, somebody that has gone through the path. I think what Guillermo was saying is very important to just have a mentor, someone that can guide you through those steps, baby steps, but also push you when you need to be pushed. I think that, especially with our current political action right now, our situation, is that if not you, then who?
Yeah.
And I think for us is that honestly, we're not in the Obama era anymore. I've been hearing people saying, oh, now that we get our new president, it's going to be hopefully more friendly to us. Things are going to be back to normal. They can't. They can't go back to normal. I think now this is the phase where I think destiny is meeting us to really challenge our own leadership and our own selves to be better.
Yes.
The thing is that no matter where you are on the political spectrum, no matter where you are, this is where we really are being challenged by fire as a community and as a whole and as a country. And I think this is moving into the 2020 election and so on, is that we need to really be the phoenix, right? Come out of the fire and really kick butt in the next couple of elections.
Please take the mic away. I saw you scribbling notes
No problem. So, something I wanted to mention in terms of getting folks engaged for the first time, it's one of the coolest things that I get to be a part of and help plan each year is Asian Pacific American Legislative Day. And I think a lot of folks know that it's not easy to, if you're not already living kind of close to Olympia, it can be tough to take time out of your schedule to get down there, find a time to meet with the legislator and talk about bills, talk about issues. And so each year we plan a legislative day, and usually on the first year of the biennium, so every other year, so like 2020, 2018 we did it, we bring, 2021, 2019, we typically bring close to 1,000 of our folks from across the entire state, from as far away as Spokane, coming from Snohomish, Spokane, Yakima. We bring all those folks from across the state to gather in Olympia. We hold a rally on the Capitol grounds. The governor comes out to address our folks. And we actually set up meetings with over 40 legislative offices just in that one day. And it's a huge effort that we put together, but something that is just so incredibly worthwhile about it for us is that we actually do these multilingual greetings in over 20 different languages to help everyone there know that this is for them. And also to help our legislators realize just the incredible diversity of our communities. Because sometimes, we had a legislator, who was trying to, it was a misguided attempt to try and thank a group. He went up to a group of Japanese Americans and he thought that they were the group of Chinese folks that came down to oppose climate action. It was embarrassing. And we thought, oh boy, this is why we got to do this every year. And we've had some of the most amazing experiences down there because sometimes for our legislature, which I think overwhelmingly hasn't had a lot of contact with the diversity of our communities, it's the first time they've ever seen a group of Tongan women in traditional dress walking down the hallways in the legislative building in Olympia. It's the first time that they've seen from some almost, just an incredible number of our communities. And it's also, for a lot of the folks, though, it's their first time meeting with a legislator. Because there are folks there who speak a language that these legislators didn't even know existed. There are folks going there speaking, not just like Chinese, Japanese, Vietnamese, Korean, but we have Samoan, we have Mien, we have Khmu. We have all these different languages that are being represented there. And it's the first time that these folks have ever gotten to communicate with their legislator. So what we do, though, through our work is, we put together that legislative agenda, so legislative priorities that we do through so gathering community input from across the state, and we work with our folks to make sure that they understand, what we're talking about. A good example is shout out to Allison McCaffrey, who's actually helped us introduce the concept of redistricting legislation to our folks. Taking the work that League of Women Voters has done and helping to actually, and my team is actually helping to communicate that information to our communities who otherwise would never know what that word even meant. And making those concepts understandable for our folks and giving them their first opportunities actually to meet with their legislators and talk about issues. So a lot of times people think that maybe they don't care, like our voting rates are lower, but really our folks care so deeply about things like education for their kids, it's healthcare, housing, jobs, all these things that I think we all care about. And it's finding ways though that it makes the legislative process and meeting with their legislator and talking about things understandable and approachable, and just making it so that they feel like that they can be a part of this too. And we actually had folks who gave us, who just told us, like, I never thought in my lifetime that, we had a woman who said, I've never thought in my lifetime that I would get to talk to my legislator. And we have those stories every year, and that's really what drives our work.
So before you sit down, can you share the date of your legislative day? Because that sounds awesome.
So this year, we're actually going to be bringing a leadership delegation from across the state to meet with our elected officials on January 28th. And we're very excited. Actually, we've already secured the meeting with the governor and are working on finalizing our list of legislative priorities. Thanks.
Well, we will stay tuned for the outcome of that, which I'm sure will be very impressive. Thank you so much. So unfortunately, we are out of time. I don't know if any of you can stick around for a bit. I'm sure folks would love to chat and have questions. Although we covered a fair amount too. So Bree and Guillermo and Joseph and Oscar, we know this is work. This is work. Coming here and speaking to us is work. And we're really grateful you took the time. So can we get a big round of applause? Oh, she's coming. She's strolling up. Stand by.
Okay, before you start moving, we're going to give you a little bit of break.